Hey, what's up you guys, Curious Owl here, and today I will be doing the Ride or Die book tag. So I was tagged in this video by my good friend Adri over at Full Time Reads. Many of you guys may know her if you do the House Cupathon, as she is one of the other co-hosts for the House Cupathon. And Adri is truly one of my greatest friends I've ever met on BookTube. We actually had met about just over a year and a half ago through another readathon called the Biblio Games that was created by Mayana from Mayana Reads. And we became very, very fast friends with two other people that we also met during the Biblio Games, and that was kind of how we created the House Cupathon. And we talk pretty much almost every single day, and we are in constant communication with each other because we really enjoy each other's company. I was really excited to be tagged in this video by her. She is just absolutely amazing. So this was a tag created about earlier this year, in like January or so, by Ladette M. And without further ado, let me get into the questions. So question one is The BFF, a book that not everyone likes but has been with you since the start. You'll always love them. I can think of 3 series off the top of my head that I talk about very, very often on my channel, one of them being the Harry Potter series, but I don't want to focus so much on that with the recent things that have happened with J.K. Rowling. I just don't feel comfortable talking about that at the moment. But one of the other ones that you guys have heard me talk about numerous times, and is a series that I just recently finished rereading, is The Morganville Vampires by Rachel Kane. The Morganville Vampires has a very special place in my heart because it is a series that I read with my grandmother for the very first time while I was in high school. And when I was in high school, I think that was kind of my more formative time of getting involved with YA, and especially with like fantasy and paranormal kind of works. And while I did read a lot in elementary and middle school, pretty much my entire life, high school, for some reason, I find that I remember a lot more of the books that I had read during that time period because I think they had just more of an impact on my reading personally, to where I think that my tastes when it comes to reading came from those books. And truthfully, the series, The Morganville Vampires itself, isn't, the best series out of everything, but it has a very special place in my heart too, because like I said, I did read it with my grandmother for the very first time while I was in high school, and we bonded a lot over that series, and so it has that little spot in my heart that I don't think is ever going to go away. And then the other series I can think of is Beautiful Creatures by Cami Garcia and Margaret Stoll, because that was like peak YA paranormal romance and all these things, and it was something that I had never seen before when I had started reading it in high school, when I was about a freshman, maybe sophomore in high school, and I just fell in love with it. I absolutely adore Ethan as a main character. I think he was incredibly, incredibly awesome and was very different from what I have seen still to this day from a lot of male-led fantasy stories. I feel like Beautiful Creatures is kind of that weird, unique story that doesn't really play by the rules in a lot of ways, and I like that that's the way it is. And when I did my reread of it in 2018, I still had a lot of the same feelings that I did when I first read it that time, and I still feel like I have the same feelings now towards them, now having been away from them for a little bit more than a year. Question 2 is The Long Drive, a book you take on a journey, or if you know you'll be spending a lot of time unable to move, like a plane, in a train, or an automobile. Well, actually, I just recently did this. If you guys had been, listening to me at all in any of the vlogs I did over the last couple of weeks, you know that just before my birthday on July 8th, Robert had taken me on vacation for a few days. And I will say I didn't do a lot of reading of the book while I was going through the drive and everything, but I did take Crazy Rich Asians with me, so it was very nice to read this in the short spurts I did over the course of my time driving through like the Upper Peninsula of Michigan and all these things and going to Mackinac Island. But I just didn't feel like I had a lot of time to read because I was so focused, especially with driving around the UP, with understanding the landscape, because the UP is very different actually in a lot of ways than the Lower Peninsula of Michigan, and so I really wanted to take all that in. So I didn't read this too much, but I did take it with me, and I felt like it was actually a really good book to read on a journey because it's fun, it's romantic, and it has a lot of drama in it, which I was kind of surprised by how much I really liked. So I definitely would recommend this if you're looking to have some kind of a fun time when you're driving on a really long road trip and things are getting kind of boring, because this will perk your spirits back right up, I think. Question 3 is The Newcomer, the most recent book you've read and you can't stop talking about. Oh gosh, what was the last book I finished? Oh, it was The New Jim Crow by Michelle Alexander. I can't stop talking about that one. I can't stop thinking about that one because it is a nonfiction book that basically discusses the reasons why there are so many Black people in prison, especially how the war on drugs that had basically started picking up in the 80s in the United States, how that really led to a lot of the reasons why we have so many Black people in prisons and why exactly we have this really weird issue with Black people getting pulled over more off the side of the road and why they're being arrested more for really kind of minuscule things as opposed to how white people are being arrested, all these kinds of things. I can't stop talking about it because it's so prevalent when you read this book, how this stuff is still happening. And I read a more recent version of this. It was recently updated this year with a new preface in the beginning of the book where Michelle Alexander basically had discussed how, especially with the Trump administration, how things about racism have gotten to be really, really intensified because we have a lot more people that have kind of come out of the woodwork about their racism and proving to be racist and having these very, very negative outlooks on the people of color community in the United States, and how our President Trump basically instigates this entire thing with it. But the book itself hadn't really changed. It just had a new preface added to it to express the fact that while things have changed quite a bit in terms of the landscape of how we discuss racism, a lot of the things leading up to the idea of mass incarceration when it comes to people of color has not really changed, and if anything is kind of starting to get worse in a lot of ways. It was a book that made me so angry because it made me realize like how bad the stuff is, and I didn't know much about the war on drugs really in terms of what happened because I wasn't alive during that time. I was not born until 1997, so I was kind of on the back end of all of that stuff that happened, but I know enough about it to where it was a really important time in US history. But I didn't know that it led to essentially what we see now in our current prison systems and how unfair that is. And so it made me very, very angry to understand what the real issue is. But it does make me feel more empowered to want to help people in like the Black Lives Matter movement because they are truly the targets of our police force and is a huge reason as to why the Black Lives Matter movement kind of started in a lot of ways. Question 4 is the quiet one, the book you reach for when you need some peace and quiet. I don't really have a particular book that does this. I think that if I kind of want to focus in on something and I don't want any kind of outside influence, like I don't want to listen to a YouTube video, I don't want people to bother me, especially like while I'm working, I think I'll focus on whatever current audiobook I have because that is basically how I am able to kind of tune out everything else and kind of get that peace and quiet time, I guess. Question 5 is the outgoing one, the book you love to read in public or don't mind keeping with you for antisocial social situations. Again, I think that leads to like audiobooks. I think that typically with a physical book, I get more people that are like, hey, you're not too busy, I'm gonna bother you kind of thing. But with an audiobook, typically it's not as often that I will get stopped and, you know, have people trying to talk to me while I'm listening to it, unless it's Robert. He's just like, hey. Question 6 is the guilty pleasure, the book you don't want to justify because it would be too embarrassing, but you love it nonetheless. I don't think I have a guilty pleasure book. I don't think I know what that even would be because truthfully, I'm not embarrassed by any of the books I love. I think that they're the books I love. Why should I be embarrassed of them? Question 7 is The Stranger, the one no one seems to have heard of and you wish everyone had read it so you could talk about it. Truthfully, I don't know this one either. I feel like I read a lot of the same books a lot of other people read, but I guess one that I think most people don't remember is the Kissed by an Angel series by Elizabeth Chandler, because I remember reading that series when I was like in late middle school, early high school, and my sister read it. I have like my actual copy of the original 3 stories, and the spine is like completely creased and everything, and I'm so afraid of opening this back up again. Like even like the top here, it's starting to come away because of the paperback, and the bottom of it, even the back of it's all banged up because not only did I read this, my sister read this, but my sister passed it around to a few of her friends who all really seemed to love it. And I feel like people in like the late 2000s, early 2010s may have heard of Elizabeth Chandler, but I feel like she's never really written anything else lately, and people have kind of forgotten about her. So I think that people should kind of come back to this because it was a story that focused on kind of a paranormal romance of sorts, but this one dealt with like angels and how one of the characters dies and he watches over his girlfriend, and he's trying to basically help her with her grief, and finds out that essentially his death may have not been accidental, and so he's trying to in some way help her figure out what happened to him, even though he's not even being seen by her. She can't really see him at all, and she's also very shaken up with her faith because she was very much a believer in her beliefs and her religion, and then when her boyfriend Tristan dies, like all of that is thrown out the window because she can't believe that God or whoever it is that she believes in would take someone that important away from her. Question 8 is, the book was better. A book you loved but the film adaptation was awful. That could be many books. First one that comes to mind for some reason is Carrie, which is the book by Stephen King's first book. I remember watching the movie with this guy I was dating at the time, and I had just read Carrie. I first read it when I was a junior in high school, and my then boyfriend at the time had me come over to his house, and we watched the original movie, and this was after a few years had passed since the newer version had come out, and so I was wanting to watch both of them, but we only ended up watching the original version, and I was really disappointed because the ending of that movie was not necessarily the same as the book, and I feel like the book's ending was kind of better, and I also liked the format of the book a lot better, where it was basically a lot of kind of flashbacks to what exactly happened leading up to the big accident that happens in the story, and it's also told in like newspaper clippings and transcripts from interviews and like the whole trial of things that happened. So I liked the format of the book better, and I also just felt like the original movie didn't necessarily play up the real potential of the book. And I haven't seen any of the other adaptations. I haven't seen the Broadway production. I haven't seen the newer movie with Chloe Grace Moretz, I think, and Jodie Foster. I think those were the two people that did the newer version of Carrie. I haven't seen either of those, so I can't really say whether or not those were good or not, but I do know that the original 1970s movie of Carrie wasn't as good as I had hoped it would have been, but also I do know that a lot of those movies that have come out in like the 70s and 80s that were King adaptations weren't really that good, so kind of just a product of its time, I think. Question 9 is the author. An author you'll read everything they'll ever produce. You trust them completely, whether it's a hardback series of 15 novels or a shopping list. Truthfully, the most recent author that I think will say that I will always buy her stuff is Ruta Sepetys. I think that as a historical fiction author, she does the time period she writes in with such justice. I have read both Out of the Easy and Salt of the Sea by her and absolutely adored both of those stories. I loved them so much, and I felt like they truly did the time periods justice. Like, it really felt like Ruta had done a great job of researching both of the time periods that these stories played into, which was fairly similar time periods, I think. One was placed in Europe in the 1940s, and I think Out of the Easy was like 1950s New Orleans, so a fairly similar time period for the most part, but two different areas of the world. And I just felt like Ruta honestly just did such a good job of doing the research that she needed to do these stories, and I just truly felt like I could trust her when it came to writing on different historical events. And so she's just one that I think if she ever comes out with something like again, I'm gonna buy it up like nobody's business. It's gonna be like on my shelf immediately. And the last question is to pick 3 YouTubers, tag them, and let them know that they're your ride or die. So Adri's already done this, and I know she did tag our friend Liv in this, but I am also going to tag our friend Ara, who is another one of our co-hosts for the House Cupathon, and I'm also going to tag my friend Jess from Jess Nevertheless. I don't know if she's watching this video or not, but I'll probably tag her on Twitter or something like that, but if she hasn't done this tag already, I would love for her to do it, because Jess has been a very, not close friend of mine yet, but we have gotten to know each other very well over the last couple of months with having done the Feel Good-a-thon together and doing a buddy read together in June, and we had a really good relationship kind of building, and just things have gotten kind of crazy, so I want to make sure I say hi to her again and see if she would want to do this tag, because I think she would like it. I think that this would be something she'd really, really enjoy. But anyway, that is all I'm going to say for right now. Thank you guys so much for joining me in this video. If you guys did enjoy it, please do give it a big thumbs up, and if you're not already and you'd like to be, hit that button down below and subscribe to become an owlet in our flock, and I will see all of you guys in my next video. Bye guys!